afternoon, and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinar Series, our premier digital platform featuring a variety of programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where you need it most. My name is Brian Gilbert, the Deputy Director here at Events here at NCIA, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to a very special year-end edition of our Service Solutions series today, presented by the team at Ceres Greenhouse Solutions. If you're just joining us, please stay on the lookout for housekeeping and orientation instructions to be relayed via the chat window, so we're not taking up any more valuable time with routine info. But if you have any questions for your team on how to participate in this virtual event, please message myself or my colleague Brooke Gilbert at any time via a private message inside the Zoom chat room. Now, let's get this show on the road. Whether you're a grower, builder, investor, member of the cannabis industry at large, or someone who is just interested in the future of cannabis cultivation technologies, this webinar is for you. Entitled Coming Out of the Dark Ages, the Future of Controlled Environment Agriculture and Sealed Greenhouse Cultivation, our program today will highlight some of the important technologies involved in modern greenhouse design, as well as Ceres Greenhouse Solutions' unique approach to facilitating cultivation to market strategies for those looking to enter this world of cannabis growth. We have a lot of information to cover and a very important topic to explore, so let's not waste any more time. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome our panelists to the virtual stage. Before we get started, I'll let the audience know a little bit more about each of your own backgrounds and expertise before turning it over to Josh to kick things off. First off, we have Josh Holub, the co-founder and co-owner of Ceres Greenhouse Solutions. Since starting at Ceres 7 years ago, Josh has created the cannabis division, bringing his more than a decade of experience in both construction, cultivation, and dispensary management to the fold. Josh approaches his job with an interdisciplinary understanding of systems, architectural design, and problem solving, and his goal is to create a whole systems approach to both design, greenhouse design, and environmental controls, resulting in the most efficient systems and highest quality product. He was featured in Marijuana Venture magazine as one of their 40 under 40 rising stars in the cannabis industry in 2018. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Sonny Kircher, who works in commercial design and sales for Ceres Greenhouse Solutions. Sonny is a strong advocate for making existing industries more sustainable, specifically by looking at closed loop system design, encouraging internal innovation, and mimicking natural systems. Between growing plants, outdoor pursuits, and studying environmental design, she has recognized the crucial role of environment or of ecosystem dynamics to the health of any community. Her background includes environmental policy, soil and rangeland ecology, GIS mapping, urban planning, food systems, and supply chain management. All right, we've primed our participants with the background they need before diving into the program. So why don't you take it away from here, Josh?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coming Out of the Dark Ages, the Future of Controlled Environment Agriculture in Sealed Greenhouse Cultivation. My name is Josh Holub with Ceres Greenhouse Solutions, and I'm here with Sonny Kircher. Hi, Sonny.
Hey, thanks, Josh.
And I've been with Ceres for about 9 years since the beginning. We are an R&D engineering and manufacturing company that designs and supplies greenhouses to cannabis growers as well as commercial ag growers and recreational growers. Our goal has always been to provide the most efficient and most effective growing space available. And our timing just worked out well with cannabis. And while both Sonny and I have a background in cannabis other than this, Ceres has just evolved along with the cannabis industry to what we believe is a really great solution and probably the future of commercial cultivation in the cannabis industry. We want to say thanks to Brian and NCIA for the opportunity to speak. And we want to thank all of you for taking the hour to listen. Sounds like we have people from all over the world, which is pretty fun. We've been working internationally, and so hopefully this is relevant to everybody that we're talking to. Cannabis started as an indoor growing thing. It was an underground product. What we're seeing now is innovation finally starting to take hold. We are leaving the indoor grow room. We call this coming out of the dark ages. HPS lamps are slowly going away. Indoor grows are starting to go away. This conversation is going to be about what is coming, what we're working on, what we're currently offering, what we hope to be offering in the future, and why, for the grower, for the business itself, why this makes sense. So this is for business people, this is for cultivators, policy people, engineering folks. We hope there will be something relevant for everybody in this conversation. And we have this chat box, so feel free to ask questions as we go. We'll try and monitor as best we can and answer those, tie them into the talk as best we can. And then we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A session if we didn't get to you during the talk itself. All right. I'm just going to assume you're all like smiling and nodding your heads yes, and we'll just get into this thing. So what is greenhouse CEA is the first question. CEA is controlled environment agriculture. It is a combination of engineering, plant science, and computer-managed greenhouse control technologies for optimization of plant growing systems, plant quality, and production efficiency. What we are trying to do is combine farming and a laboratory is really what it comes down to. We are growing plants. We get so deep into engineering and buildings and systems, and we often have to step back and say, okay, we're growing plants. And what do the plants want? The plants want sunlight, really, and we're trying to give them that the best way that we can, which was lighting, and still has a lot to do with lighting. But sunlight is really the goal. What we also know is that cultivators are used to controlling the environment. This is a high quality crop. Indoor grows allow for very precise environmental controls. And that is something that growers are demanding and for good reason. And so where we are with CEA is trying to combine the sunlight, which is free, with the controlled environment that the grower wants, the plant wants, and the business operator needs. CEA is a fairly established field of study. The fact that cannabis is now a pretty large industry means that there's more money for research, and we're going to be learning more and more as time goes on. But there are major CEA study centers in the US. University of Arizona in Tucson has a biosphere and a whole program. Cornell University does a bunch of work with CEA. And so this isn't a new technology. There's a lot of new things that are coming with new products that are available, but this is something studied and fairly well understood, even though there's still a lot to learn. Sunny. Brian, next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Josh and Brian, for getting things started. So as Josh said, plants are at the core of this industry, right? No matter why you're here, what your background is, you're somehow working with or near the cannabis plant, right? It's a part of your interests. And so we're going to begin by just doing a quick overview of like the plant science component of CEA. And this will probably take some of you back to high school biology for a moment, but I think it's always good to review the basics and make sure that we're all on the same page and build upon that. So starting with a very molecular component of all of this is the photosynthesis, which directly translates to plant growth. So, imagine if I'm a plant, I literally am taking in carbon dioxide from the air around me. I mean, today I'm in outer space, so there's not a lot of carbon dioxide, but on a normal day on planet Earth, and water coming up through my roots and combining that with photons from the sunlight or wherever the source of light is around. And that through the miracle of photosynthesis converts to simple sugars, glucose, and oxygen. And so this chemical reaction has been around for a very long time, and it's not changing. And a big part of CEA is to understand this and recognize how you can control the variables that lead to photosynthesis. Because when a plant is photosynthesizing, it's growing, either in size or going into a flowering stage and producing product for the industry. And so, yeah, that's just a quick overview of the fundamental level of CEA is plant growth. And so you can see in this this diagram that we have right here on the left, we've got a small plant growing in the middle and all of these external components, the variables that you can begin to control in CEA. So with that, I will pass it back to Josh. Brian, you can go to the next slide.
So the first thing that we think about, of many, and we'll get into all of them, but the first thing that we're thinking about with cannabis production is light. When we started in Colorado, which is where we're based, you could not grow in a greenhouse or outdoors. It was indoor cultivation only. And the industry was formed around that. That became the standard. It had been the standard before cannabis was legal to cultivate anyways. Now we can use the sun. The sun obviously is the cheapest source of light for our plants. It has the spectrum that the plants want, or at least wanted. Some might argue they've been bred to use what they're used to now, but we would always say that still the sun is it. It has UV light. And so our goal, which is for highest quality, highest yield, lowest operating costs, is to utilize the sun as much as we possibly can. We are looking at a lot of things when we're looking at light. I also want to say that this isn't only sun. When we design a proper cultivation facility, there is a full LED lighting system that can accommodate whatever the cultivator's minimum PPFD level is or DLI level that they want on a daily basis. So even on the shortest day in the middle of the winter with no sun, we can always hit that minimum light level. You can see on the little chart that we've got a few things that we're taking into consideration when we're thinking about light. DLI is a daily lighting integral. This is the accumulation of the amount of light that the plants have seen throughout the day. When we are laying out lighting strategies for a cannabis greenhouse, we're usually trying to hit between 40 and 45 DLI per day. What we do then is we can calculate how much the sun is giving us. In the middle of summer on a sunny day, it might be all sun the whole day. And in the winter, it might be a third sun and 2/3 supplemental lighting. But regardless, we're going to hit that minimum DLI level. What the DLI is taking into account is intensity of the light. Duration, obviously, we control with a light depth system or by adding light in the winter. We're in the winter months now, so we're often adding 3 hours of light in the morning, 3 hours of light in the evening, and hoping that the sun's giving us enough in the middle of the day, and dimming lights up and down throughout the day as needed to make sure we're hitting our levels. And then what we lay these things out with is PPFD, which is photosynthetic photon flux density. This is micromoles per meter squared per second. It's how much light is hitting a square meter per second. So we can control lights based off PPFD, where they're always getting whatever your minimum is, 700 PPFD, 900 PPFD. For a full 12-hour spectrum, whether that's sun or lights, they're going to get it. Or we can use DLI, which says, okay, we've hit 40 DLI for the day. It's 5 p.m. We have 2 more hours of the photo period. So let's dim down the lights because we don't actually need the intensity right now, but we need the duration. Or if we have a light that adjusts spectrum, let's go red with the lights. It's the most efficient way to use the lights. It keeps them in the photo period, but they don't need the intensity. And so with our controller, we can play with lighting in that way to optimize yield, optimize quality, and minimize input expenses. Okay, next slide. The next thing, and probably other than sunlight, the most exciting thing for me personally is controlling the environment of the greenhouse. So now we're letting sunlight in. The greenhouse is warming. It's just something that happens with sunlight. Infrared light is coming in and the greenhouse is warming. Even on the coldest day, we're in Colorado, it could be 10 degrees outside Fahrenheit. It could be 0. We still need to cool the greenhouse. The sun warms it. These are highly sealed, insulated greenhouses. We need to cool the greenhouse. And there are also, times when it's gray and we have to heat the greenhouses. So how do we do it? And how do we do it efficiently and effectively? We base our controls on vapor pressure deficit. Some people know what this is, some don't. Vapor pressure deficit is the ratio of temperature to humidity that actually creates a pressure in kilopascals that allows the plants the optimum conditions to uptake nutrients and transpire. So basically what we're trying to create is an ideal environment for the plants to move the nutrients that you're trying to feed them so that they grow faster, so that they have higher quality flower, and then we try and do it in the most efficient way possible. So traditionally in an indoor greenhouse, we're trying to be at 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 50% humidity or something like that, and we want to lock it down. The issue with that in a greenhouse is that the sun's out, it's August in the Northern Hemisphere, it's a hot summer day, it is very expensive, both in infrastructure and operating cost, to keep a greenhouse at 75 degrees. And with the vapor pressure deficit controls, it's not necessary. So we can let the grower choose what they think a high pressure is, or a high temperature can be. We usually start around 84. I think we have growers who will let it run up to 88 once they learn the system, but we take humidity with it, depending on stage of growth with the plant. So instead of cooling, we can actually let it warm, and using a high pressure fogging system, which is part of our system, we can actually bring humidity up with it. You can see in the chart when we're flowering, we're in yellow. As we let the temperatures warm, which is as the yellow dives to the bottom right, we can just increase humidity with it to stay in our yellow band. Obviously, when you have big flowers on the plant, we're not going to let it run up to 70% humidity. So at that point, we will start cooling, and we'll keep the humidity low, either by not adding fog or by dehumidifying. But for the first few weeks of flower, if not the first 4 weeks of flower, whatever the cultivator feels comfortable with, we can significantly reduce operating costs with cooling. Yeah, Sunny.
All right, so going underground, which I find one of the more exciting components of CEA, but really it's all about how it ties together. It's not any one component or variable here. So nutrients and water, also essential to plant growth. If you have everything above ground perfect, you have that perfect VPD, the perfect PPFD, your plant still is not going to grow if it doesn't have water or the right amount of nutrients for that given time. And so, like we've been saying, it's a balance of all these different variables to lead to plant health. And so determining, there's no one right way to set your nutrients or your watering schedule in any cultivation. The first thing you want to look at is, what is your grow style and what makes sense? Are you growing in soil, hydroponics, aeroponics, or some combination of those? And a good way that I like to tell people to make that decision is actually looking outside of the facility and seeing what you have available on site. Are you in an area where you don't have a lot of water, perhaps in Arizona, Nevada, et cetera, where it makes sense to choose a grow style that's going to be, light on your water usage, such as aeroponics or hydroponics, or a very different climate. Say you're in Michigan and you have plenty of water, but not as much sunlight, or you're in a more rural area and access to power through the utility is actually the limiting factor. So these are kind of some of the approaches to thinking on making a decision about what grow style will make the most sense for your cultivation. So another component too, once you're inside the facility, is the stage of the plant cycle, right? You're going to be watering and feeding different nutrients depending on what stage of growth you're in. The same with light. So you can think of these as recipes that you're combining with the set points on the VPD and the PPFD as well. And so this graphic that we have here on the right is one of our facilities, and on the upper left part is the head house. And I want to just take you through a tour really quick, following that dark blue line. On the right side, it's in the water treatment room. And then once that water gets treated, it's going over to the other F, and light blue is where it becomes fertigated. So you're adding whatever nutrients and supplements you want and distributing that into the different grow rooms. So flowering in the greenhouses, and then mothers and clone in the head house. And so these, we're looking at the input side of things. All water, for the most part, is going to be taken up through the root system. A very small percentage of nutrients can also be taken up through the leaves. But so we're beginning by inventorying our resources here. And as the plant is growing, right, it's taking up those water and nutrients, and up to 90% of it is released through a process called transpiration. So the plant is quite literally exhaling water vapor out of its leaves. And where does that go? What we do is we recapture that water through the condensate. So that's where that, let's call it teal color is. That water is being recaptured and sent back to the water treatment room to be reused. And the lighter green is the effluent, so any runoff water coming out of the plants, or rather out of the media that the plants didn't take up. And so, the beautiful thing about this diagram is it's a closed loop system. None of that water is leaving the facility, except for once it's been taken up into biomass. So we have a really low water usage, and it's being used really efficiently. And so, the other point here, one more thing, Brian, is how do we monitor things like this to optimize the performance of the facility and the growth of the plant. Oops. I hope my audio is coming in okay. I'm going to say this last thing and then I'll figure it out. So we have soil moisture meters is one way. So actually measuring the moisture in the soil to determine if the plant is taking it up. And sap flow is another metric that we can read, also known as bricks. So it's the content of the sugar and the movement inside of the plant once it's taken up the water and nutrients. So there's all sorts of ways to monitor how the water is moving, how quickly, and if it's being used efficiently. So that's a quick overview. I'll hand it off to the next slide.
And just so you know, Sonny, your audio seems to have corrected itself. It might have just been a bandwidth issue on my end. So sorry for the distractions.
Good. Hope everyone could hear me.
Perfect.
All right. So the next thing in the environment is airflow and CO2. So traditionally, any grow room is going to have some sort of air circulation, whether it's oscillating fans, moving air and creating a gentle breeze on the plants, or in a greenhouse, horizontal focused fans. In our greenhouses, we're putting our heat cool in through the north wall of the greenhouse, all of it, and then we use a half fan to circulate the air. It's fairly standard. A newer technology that's being used, we use it, most do, is a destratification fan. So in a greenhouse especially, because there's sunlight during the day and potentially cold temps at night, where the roof is actually much colder than you would ever see in a indoor cultivation room, the air will stratify. So heat obviously rises, which means you could have a cool zone in your plants, which is our focus is the plant zone. We don't really care what's happening up top. Destrap fans blow directly down. There's a few manufacturers that we like that make the fans, but the idea is as heat rises, we are moving that air back down to the ground, especially in the winter when heating and consistency and temperature is the most important. In the summer, if it's hot out, we may or may not have the destrap fans on. They're controllable with a whole house controller. And depending on the environment in the greenhouse, they may or may not be used. So we have airflow moving horizontally in the greenhouse, and we have airflow moving vertically in the greenhouse, which creates a fairly consistent temperature and humidity ratio along with CO2 throughout the whole greenhouse, which is really important. Helps with consistency. As you can see in this graphic, the other thing that we do, and this is something that we'll begin to see more and more of, is we can control the pressure in the rooms of the greenhouses, not just the greenhouse, but the whole facility. In Europe and in Canada as well, while the terminology isn't always the same, GMP, which is good manufacturing practices, and GACP, which is good agriculture and collection practices, are keywords for design. Facilities have to be designed to a certain spec to be able to recreate the same outcome over and over. And so what we can do through the HVAC system is create pressures in certain rooms, higher pressure in some, lower pressure in others, to manage airflow. In the diagram you're seeing, what we've done in this building is veg rooms on the east side and west side of the head house, which is the rectangle on the top of the picture. That's the north side for us. Those veg rooms, plants flow down both exterior hallways towards the south, through the greenhouses, and then harvest, you go back up the central corridor. We encourage cultivators and staff to always flow in that direction. What that means is that if we know where a pathogen may be, and we know that it won't get from one greenhouse to the next greenhouse unless there's some kind of user error. We also know that when we harvest the plants, the central corridor might be exposed, and we know to clean it. So through airflow, we can help minimize pest or mold mildew issues. The other important thing to think about here is CO2. CO2 is commonplace. Studies show up to 30% more yield, and most commercial growers, especially indoor, are using it. A vented greenhouse, you really can't use CO2 supplementation in the summer, at least, because you're using ambient exterior air as you're cooling, and so you're moving a lot of air through the greenhouse. If you were supplementing CO2, you're really just exhausting it out the fans, and it's not effective. In our case, not only is CO2 food for the plants, but it also makes the plants more stout. Plants can handle higher temps, more stress in general in a CO2 rich environment. And not that we're stressing the plants, but it is a bit of a safety measure for the plants and for your entire cultivation facility. We also use a modulating CO2 valve. It's not just on or off any longer. It's open a little bit. It's open a lot, depending on what we need. And when we look at a graph of CO2 in a greenhouse, traditionally it's up and down, zigzag, high, low, and that's open, close. What we can do is create a almost totally straight line across the board. It can be at whatever 1200, 1500 ppm all day long. That's consistent for your plants. That means you're not wasting any CO2. You're being very precise with it, which is part of our goal, is getting the plants what they need in the most efficient way possible.
So, we've really gone deep into a lot of these variables here. Now we're going to transition in a little bit about how they relate to each other and how we are really making the CEA come to life. So ecology, first of all, is the study of relationships. So it's not about, biology, you're studying life, chemistry, you're studying compounds, and ecology, you're studying the relationships. And that is a lot of what we're doing at Ceres and what happens in CEA when you fiddle with one variable, how is that going to affect all of the others? And you can really get into the fun stuff when you change two variables and see how that affects plant health. And so the overall goal of it is really to optimize performance and plant health. And so some examples of how we could do this in the greenhouse facility is, using light fixtures as a heat source. So this would be really with HPS lights, not LEDs, but that, oops, am I still on here?
Yeah, you're good. I was just getting the screen share reoriented. Sorry about that, Sunny.
Okay, sorry. So, if you chose to use HPS lights in your cultivation, they also have a high BTU heat output. And so that would be considered in sizing HVAC systems that, looking at lighting schedules of when those lights are on and when you will be heating the facility. So a second example would be to use fogging as stage 1 cooling. So I think that we think a lot about dehumidification in grow environments, but humidification is also real. If the environment is too dry, then the plants are not going to be growing to their optimum health. And so we can use fogging as stage 1 cooling as well as a way to increase the humidification. So the point of this example is that certain systems can be used for multiple purposes, not just one. So next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about how we can control them.
So what we're doing here is just going through what controls have looked like over the years. While I've never used it, I'm sure that some people used to plug in or turn on their lights at 7 in the morning and turn them off at 7 in the evening. Early on, we were all using timers to control our lights. And usually, I know in my case, I was there to make sure the lights were on in the morning and to make sure they were off in the evening, because the $20 timer had a pretty critical role in my overall grow. We've evolved somewhat into light sensors, where now we can see what's going on with lights. We can tell the spectrum. We can see how powerful the lights are. We know that when the sun's out, our light reader tops out at 2200 ppfd. And in the greenhouse that I'm in right now, any sunny day for almost all the year, we will max out in at least the middle of the day, if not most of the day, with that ppfd level. I can't see how high it is because my reader doesn't go that high. And then the next stage, which is what Sunny was just talking about, is the smart integrated control. The idea here being that all systems are talking to each other through one channel to optimize the grow and make it as efficient as possible while still providing all the set points that you're after. It gives us the ability to be quite precise while being very efficient. We see this with some of our earlier greenhouses before we offered the smart controls. I'll walk into a grow room indoor or even some of our greenhouses, and the dehues will be running, and they're running on a humidistat, and the fogger is also running at the same time. That is bad on a lot of levels, but mostly your plants are probably a little bit confused and you're wasting a lot of energy. And that is basically stands against everything that we're trying to do here. Also, what Sunny talked about with water flow, we used to just, traditionally, not Ceres, but growers in general, we'd crank water through an RO to get into the storage tank so that we're ready to use it. Meanwhile, our dehues are doing 200 pints a day, and we're draining that out into the sewer system. That is distilled water. It's basically RO water, and we're just setting it out, but we're using a pump to press water through a membrane. Costs us money to make that. What we do is we capture our dehu water, we send it back to the head house. Water pump is low energy. We do refilter it, not through an RO, but we kill biologicals, whether that's with ozone or with a UV light, and we reuse that water. We're now water efficient, so we're not paying for water, nor are we paying to use the RO system, which requires high pressure and can be expensive, and you need membranes and all that. So we end up with the same outcome, but with much less input. With the control side of thing, with the environment, heat, cool, sometimes instead of dehumidifying, we can heat. So the warmer areas, the more moisture it can hold. So with the same amount of moisture, as air gets warmer, the relative humidity decreases. So it is basically a dehumidification process, but heating can be cheaper, is cheaper than dehumidification. Heating is heat into the air. Dehumidification is a major cooling down to the dew point, and then a reheat to get the air back to inside room temp, and then you let it back in the room. So instead of dehumidifying, we can heat if it's within our range of where we're comfortable with our plants living in, to maintain VPD. So those are really cool little ways where it's nothing is rocket science here, but it's an idea of what are we trying to create, and then what is the best way to do that. And on the end, when a cycle is complete and we've harvested, we can now look back through our smart controller at all the data, how the lights dimmed up and down, how much dehu we were using, heating costs, cooling costs, and we can compare that to yield, strain and yield. If we like what we saw, next time we're growing that strain, we can just click run that same program, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever it is, run it, and it'll run it. Or we can start tweaking things. We can say, let's use that red spectrum only if we've hit DLI, but we need to maintain photo period in this one. And let's see what that does to yield and quality when we're done. And let's see how much more efficient that makes us. We can fog more, we can fog less, and we can start making these little tweaks, compare it to the output, and then begin to really get good at optimizing our grow. Because in the end, the name of the game here is efficiency. We think a lot about cost per gram, because as cannabis normalizes, and we've seen it, prices have come down and down. They're fairly stable now, especially in established markets. But knowing that you can be operational and profitable at whatever, 500 a pound, 800 a pound, is reassuring, especially when the market rate's 1,500 a pound. But knowing that you can do that where others can't is a good business position to be in.
All right. So you're probably thinking, this is a no-brainer. This is amazing. How do I do this? It looks like there it is, the image. So let's talk a little bit about how we actually go through the design process for creating a sealed greenhouse facility and using CEA. Time is a major component for our approach to design. And I'm not just talking about speed, like how fast can I make this happen, but being able to look back at market and industry trends, as well as making educated assumptions about what is coming. So, one perspective is, what kind of product do I want to grow? Am I growing a plant for high grade flower, or for the edibles market, or for extraction, etc.? And so again, knowing your market based on location and the maturity per state or per region, and knowing your consumers and your customers will really help determine that. And so these are the kind of conversations that we're having before we even dive into designing the HVAC system. Is, what do you see? What's your vision, and how is it going to fit per place. And, other components too are looking at your employees and what is the available labor force like, what is the skill set, and the location of your build. If you're in a really rural area, there's a good chance you won't have a lot of a labor pool to choose from, and so you might want to go more automated, versus if you are in a place where you have a team that's already trained that you want to put into this facility, maybe you already have all your SOPs in place. And so kind of zooming out on the bigger picture of how to make these decisions for your facility and to have success is part of the holistic design approach. So, this is a little bit beyond the scope of CEA, but it's very much relevant to the industry, and your success is talking about the people and the market and why you're doing what you're doing. And so, going back into that component of time, using existing templates as a starting point is something that we do as a design and engineering firm to accelerate the design process, at least having standards that have already proven successful that we can use in your project if that's something that you would like. QBD is a concept, it's quality by design. And going back to what Josh was saying about GMP and GACP, these certifications, quality by design is a way to approach those. And basically you're just taking certain things into consideration with design. It's a systematic approach to product and process development. And the goal is to deliver a safe and also consistent product. And so this is especially more relevant for those who are working in either medical industries or preparing for export, to have a really consistent product there. And eventually, I think most people recognize this, and especially I know we have a lot of international attendees that export is very much happening and on the horizon, and probably where the industry is going eventually. And so being able to deliver that product, whether it be to meet a certification or even just to continue your brand loyalty and to your customers and clients, is really important. And so some of the things that we're looking at for QBD are employee workflow, biosecurity, environmental consistency, which is really what we've been talking about this for most of this presentation, and then measurability and being efficient in the manufacturing process. And I'm just going to kind of combine these last 3 points here because I know we're getting close on time, but this is about how we go about the design process. It's not just one discipline, it's not just Ceres involved, but there's architects, civil engineers, maybe a landscape architect, et cetera. And so identifying, bringing that team together from the beginning is really crucial as well to have a successful design process all the way through the building. You want your facility built properly and quickly, and then getting to market and making sure that it's operating just as it was designed. All right, next slide.
Okay, and I believe our last slide is the business case for CEA. So everything we've talked about is with the goal of having a viable business that makes you money, that is environmentally responsible, happy employees, happy plants. But there is a breakdown that when you look at this on paper, it needs to make sense as well. And we're asking for, when you build something like this, it's not a small investment upfront. So my notes are a little funny here, but I'm going to start with energy efficiency rebates. What we're learning is that because this is such a holistic system and because there's so much designed into it to reduce energy costs, that almost anywhere in the US that we build, and also we're learning in Canada as well, we are getting rebates from the power company, and they can be significant. So we do that work on our end because it helps us to sell greenhouses, but also it's really important aspect of what we're doing is to prove that our design is actually reducing the operating costs like we say it is. when you build a facility like this, you're reducing the need for chemicals, which allows for easier sales, higher quality product, lower operating costs. Now that's in labor and in materials. You have to buy the fungicides, pesticides. And it also gives you a consistency where as a business owner, you know that you're always going to have the consistent product to sell. You're never worried that you're going to lose a crop like you have potentially been in the past. It gives you this peace of mind that we're dialed, and we're going to have a harvest. And some of our clients are even to the point where they can pre-sell harvests because over the past 4 or 5 years, they've been so consistent with quality, that the people who are buying from them know it's coming and they know it's going to be good. And so they can pre-sell, which is really nice from the business perspective. The left side of this is an example of one of our clients. In the end, the breakdown in gray is what's most important. Utility costs alone in our greenhouses, we're using only electricity. We're not actually using gas. We have a geothermal system. We are growing for utility costs, including lighting, heating, cooling, dehu, of as little as 2 cents a gram. It doesn't mean that we're not using, it's not all just power reduction. It's also increase in yield. So we spend less, but we're growing more. And the combination of those two makes that cost per gram drop significantly. Whereas traditionally an indoor grow with HPS might have been 30 to 50 cents a gram. And here you can begin to see that at $9 a pound utility inputs, and some of our clients are able to sell for above wholesale pricing because of the quality of the product. But let's call it $1,500 a pound. You're in really good shape to have a stable business over time. And that's really our goal here. In the end, for the grower, you're cranking out indoor conditions with full sunlight. You're getting the highest quality product on the market, with full UV, which is good for terpenes, cannabinoids. It's a mild stressor on the plants, which is beneficial. It also reduces pests. And we're seeing happy customers growing a lot of product at minimal inputs, which is the goal of this whole conversation. And with that, I think we can wrap it up and move into some questions.
Yeah, perfect. I've seen you do an amazing job engaging with the Q&A throughout the session, Josh. So thank you for doing that. So all of you all that had some burning questions, we're going to transition to the Q&A portion of the event right now. We've got 2 open questions there. So even if you don't have a question to submit yourself, pop on over to the Q&A board and give an upvote to any of those open questions that might be worthwhile. And while we're doing that, why don't we just dive right into a few? So yeah. We've got, why don't we just respect chronology here? So let's go with Paul's question. Paul asked, how much can humidity be reduced with a GAAP system that might hit the water table? Is it realistic to not require additional dehumidification with that system?
Yeah, so we offer, it's a GAHT system. It's the ground to air heat transfer. And it is a low tech geothermal system, internal air exchange. It is not capable of being your sole dehumidifier. In commercial cannabis, we don't use the GAT system because we are going for more precision. If it is warm in the greenhouse and cold outside, we can dehumidify with the GAT system, but it's not controllable the way most cannabis growers need it to be.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, we're just going to go down the line here. So we've got another question from Brian. I'm in a market that won't allow a south glazed wall for security purposes. I had the idea of building the head house on the first floor and sealed greenhouse on the second. Is this viable in your opinion?
It's a great question. This greenhouse that I'm in actually also cannot have a south glazed wall. And while this looks glazed, it's because this is one, and then there's another greenhouse here. They're connected, and then that solid wall over there. from the design point of view, that's easy. A solid south wall is easy. What we do then is adjust our lighting. So now the south few rows of lights are going to be their own zone. And we're going to call that the winter lighting zone, because you're going to be casting some shadow on your farthest south plants in the winter when the sun is lower. A rooftop greenhouse is possible, but at that point you get into very custom structures, and costs start to accumulate. And so normally we would just say solid south wall. We can work with the lighting is all reactive, so it doesn't turn on unless it's in the shade. It has a light sensor in that zone. And so we'd say, let's just work with our lighting layout to make sure that in the winter you have lights on the plants, and in the summer you're taking full advantage of the sunlight.
Great. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, great. Thanks for all these awesome questions, everybody in the audience. Perfect. We've got one more open question from RDoc. Please tell us more about CapEx, if possible. And if that's an acronym, apologies.
CapEx is capital expenditure, just to make sure everyone's aware. And RDoc, I believe you said in the beginning you're in Greece, which is going to be slightly different because we actually have manufacturing in northern Italy for our European clients. In the US and Canada, on our end, and this is very rough numbers, we're seeing that our kit, the materials you're buying from Ceres, this is unbuilt, is like in the $160 to $180 per square foot range. Now that is soup to nuts. We're talking full greenhouse, light depth, LED lighting, smart controls, geothermal HVAC dehumidification system, high pressure fogging, bipolar ionization. You know, this is the cream of the crop. And then it has to be built as well. It's hard. We try and help with estimating construction numbers, but it's quite difficult because construction is out of control right now. I mean, everyone is so busy. And from place to place, North Dakota versus Southern California, it's wildly different. And so while we can help with that in the actual design process, it's hard for us to say, like, here, hypothetically, what constructing it might cost.
Fantastic. Well, that seems like a great question for a further follow-up conversation after the webinar. So definitely make use of the contact information that you see listed here. Josh and Sunny would both be very interested in talking more about your needs surrounding any of the products or services that they've outlined today. And it looks like we just got another question coming in right before the end of the hour. So I definitely don't want to shortchange Paul here. So got another question from Paul. He asks, can you talk about your smallest starter greenhouse kit that we could build? And have you shipped any of those to Canada in the past?
Yeah, so, this is kind of a fun one. We have a greenhouse that's as small as, I actually don't know the east to west length because I don't deal with the little guys, but 11 foot by 16 foot or something. It is not a cannabis specific greenhouse. It can't take light depth. The smallest greenhouses that we can put light depth in are 18 foot north to south by whatever length east to west that you want. And yes, we have hemp facilities in British Columbia. We just designed cannabis facility in Quebec. We have commercial lettuce growers in Ottawa right now. And so we work in Canada often. They just very strange zip codes in Canada, letters and numbers, it confuses us.
Oh, those always catch me when I'm searching my database. Perfect. Okay, great. So we don't have any more questions right now. We are going to transition into the outro of the event. So I'll give 10, 15 seconds. If anybody has a burning question at the top of their brain, definitely want to make use of this live broadcast time to share those with the panelists. So if you got any more questions, we'll get those in now. All right, not coming through. So while we transition back to final thoughts from both Josh and Sunny here, if you have any additional questions, pop them in there and we'll transition before going into the outro. But if not, why don't I turn it back over to Josh and Sunny real quick to leave us with some final thoughts from today's program.
I'll start. I don't think any project is too small or too big. And I think that Ceres can help you. And if not, like, you can find a way to succeed in this industry. And the best way to do that is start by just, evaluating what resources you have available on site, or, maybe it's financial, and also just with your team. What is it that you have and what is it that you need? And do your research. There's a lot of good information out there. And yeah, I'll leave it with that. We'd love to hear from any of you. And thanks for joining us today, and hope everyone has a happy holiday.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all of that. And, one of our goals are happy plants, and one of our goals is happy people working in the spaces. And using sunlight however you can, whether it's this or some other way, is really good for the plants, cheaper for operations, but it's good for the morale of the team. And we see growers who've kept employees for years, which is pretty rare in the cannabis industry, because you're farming again, and it's really nice to be working in the sunlight. When it's dark, you're not working there, and so that's a really cool thing, is to kind of bring it back to the sun and to the idea of farming, which is something that we really appreciate.
Oh, perfect. We couldn't have ended the program with any other way than that. So fantastic. Well, thank you so much to Josh and Sunny for joining us today. We're going to transition into the outro of the program. All of you all should have seen a final post-session survey just pop up on your screen. So please do submit your responses to that, letting us know if you'd be interested in us sharing contact information for any follow-up outreach by the Ceres team, as well as if this presentation has changed your outlook on the cannabis cultivation process, and if you'd like to learn more about CEA. All right, perfect. Well, Josh and Sunny, you all can leave the virtual stage per se, and thank you all once again for presenting today's session. We're really excited to have you all here, and we're going to leave it with that. As always, we're going to leave you all with our end of event credit sequence highlighting all of the member businesses that participated in today's session. So a huge thank you again to our panelists, our audience members, and member businesses which make our work possible. Special thanks once again to the Ceres Greenhouse Solutions team for developing and presenting today's program. You'll all be directed to a post-event survey after the meeting room closes. Please make sure to complete this to provide us some really valuable feedback on your participation with the event. And do note that all NCIA members will receive exclusive access to a formatted video recording first posted in our members-only community platform, NCIA Connect, and then stay on the lookout for the public webinar recording to be posted on our NCIA webinar archive at thecannabisindustry.org in the coming days as well. All right. And then I hope you all have a wonderful week. I look forward to seeing you all again next time for another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. We'll leave you with this end of event credit sequence highlighting the 24 member businesses that participated in this afternoon's session. If you don't see yourself included, then you're one of the 50 non-member businesses that attended today, and we really hope that you'll consider joining today. Doing so will grant your team access to exclusive monthly members-only webinars, as well as a number of additional benefits included in our membership. You can learn more and join now at thecannabisindustry.org. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful end to your year, and I look forward to seeing you all again on the other side of 2020. See you next time.